Welcome to the Whistleblower of the Week podcast, hosted by FBI whistleblower Jane Turner. Join her as she shares the stories of real life heroes and people of integrity.
Hello, this is Jane Turner with Whistleblower of the Week, and today we have two extraordinary people on this podcast. I am so delighted to have them. One is Dr. Tommy, also known as Toni Savage. She is a whistleblower, and we have her attorney with us today, who is Michael Kohn. He is known and recognized worldwide as an expert in whistleblower laws and policy. So we are really lucky today to have these two individuals. Welcome. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about Dr. Tommy, also known as Toni Savage. She was a highly respected Army Corps of Engineers Supervisory Contracting Officer in Huntsville, Alabama. She was responsible for reviewing and awarding highly classified, high-profile Army contract programs. She was recognized by Huntsville's deputy commander as the most valuable employee located in the Huntsville contracting office. Although Toni was showered with accolades, awards, and promotions, and always being congratulated for her integrity and outstanding performance, her career came to a screeching halt in 2006 as a result of refusing to turn her back on millions of dollars in fraudulent contracting activity occurring in the Army's Ranges program. Welcome, Toni. Welcome, Michael. I am so delighted to have you here today. And let's start out with Toni. Toni, welcome. You are a hero. I hope you know that.
Hi.
And you were a highly awarded contracting officer for the Army Corps of Engineers. Can you tell us about your early career and the many successes you achieved, which landed you in the Huntsville, Alabama Support Center?
Well, first of all, glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me. So good to see you again, Jane. You and
Yes,
Mike. Mike is my hero, as you know. Uh,
yes.
so yeah, as I started my career, I like to start out because of the fact that my belief in hard work and even really what our nation is built on. That someone that's coming from any background can work their way up to the top level. So I always like to start out by saying that when I started my job with the Corps of Engineers, I'm a native of Memphis, Tennessee. It was a summer job. And so, because I could type and they needed typists, I started out just right out of high school, graduated high school that summer. I started working for the Corps of Engineers as a clerk, a typist, a student, a summer program
Hmm.
person. And then I was promoted to a college co op. So I got into the college program there and worked my way up from there uh, from a GS3 as a summer student. We were grade 00. So as a college student co-op, I went from a grade 3 and eventually a GS13 throughout my career.
Wow.
So I started in Memphis, worked my way up through human resources at the time. Got married. My husband Julian, also was with the Corps of Engineers. We moved here. I graduated college. We moved here to Huntsville, Alabama. Initially, just coming with him as his career was blossoming as an engineer, and so I got a temporary job with human resources, and then became a contract clerk. And so from a clerk, I worked my way up to a contract journeyman position. And so you progressed as you successfully completed every level. You progressed to eventually, I became a level 3 DAWIA certified contracting officer with an unlimited contract and a secret clearance. And so, that's just kind of the progression of my job. I worked many myriad of programs. Uh, as a contracting officer with an unlimited, because you had progressions of that, so you could have a tiny uh, award warrant, or you could have unlimited, such as I did, and it just again showed the uh, what the Army believed you were capable of doing. You were trustworthy to be a steward. I always
Mhm.
considered myself a steward over taxpayer dollars. So we awarded contracts, and I worked on many programs. And I'm so glad that you're giving me this opportunity, because I know, because of my Rangers work and what happened there, uh, the focus tends to be on Rangers. But I worked on the ground-based missile defense program. That's responsible for the our weapon systems for the security of our nation. Also, the environmental program. We did important work on Spring Valley. I'm not sure if many of your audience knows. They probably do, because a lot of it was in the Baltimore area. But there was ordnance found in a very prosperous neighborhood. And so, as a contracting officer, I oversaw contracts that were responsible for cleaning up the ordnance that was found in people's backyards, where they built these luxury homes on top of this uh, place that used to hold World War I ordnance. Even in my hometown of Memphis, Tennessee, there was an army depot that had mustard gas and so on. So we had to do all of that cleanup. I worked on
Mhm.
Intelligence Security Command, where that was a classified contract. We had secret sites. So not much I can say about that, but I did I did work on that secret contract. I worked on even our child development centers, and I took great joy with that, being a mother myself, making sure that those were in compliance with regulations, even the types of playgrounds that they were responsible for building for the safety of the kids, so that they wouldn't hurt themselves. I worked on um, operations and maintenance contracts, where we did medical facilities, did work on Walter Reed, even. So many contracts. I could go on and on. Energy savings, seismic value. We did topographic contracts. So I had a uh, very extensive career. What I enjoyed about it was the different programs that I did work. I saw different types of work that we were responsible for. I worked with so many different people, really around the world. And so that brought me great joy to know that I was contributing, being productive, and being contributing to my nation's security, and just building also this country up through our contracts. I really viewed it as service, civilian civilian service. So it was very rewarding for me. And again, I just really enjoyed working with the people that I met.
So, Tony, you were obviously in a federal job. You were doing great. You were recognized. Things were going just really well. What happened? What turned you into a whistleblower?
Well, part of the job, and again, when, as we typically say, no one starts out by saying, I'm going to be
No,
a whistleblower.
no.
So you're just, doing your job, trying to do it with integrity.
Mhm.
And so I was promoted to a supervisor job. And from that promotion, I was one of the other programs that was added on top of the others that I had was the Rangers program. And so they had another contracting officer, but then when I got promoted to this job, they put that program under me. As I began working on the program, I saw a lot of the inconsistencies. I saw uh, what is now known, when you're first learning a program, you're just, becoming familiar with it. And I just knew that some things were not adding up. But then I began to see a pattern. And so it was, just fraudulent. We saw government estimates that were seemingly mirroring the proposals, or I guess I should say the proposals were mirroring the government estimates on this program. And one of the greatest things that stuck out to me that I really spoke out against is although they had a program manager that was designated, who was a government employee, um, for the most part, most of the work was being done by a contractor. And so, because of the federal acquisition regulation, uh, what we knew as, or we typically coined, the contracting Bible, uh, they had to have people, government employees, and contractors could not do inherently government duties. And so what I saw was this contractor, and actually he was a subcontractor, so he worked under someone, but he could see other contractors' proposals. He was essentially functioning as the program manager. And so, as I began to try to right the ship and correct some of the things that I was seeing um, in this program, of course, that did not go over well because you had the program manager had been there about 20 years at that time. And so you can imagine that the culture that had set up on
Right.
this team and this program. And also, one thing I like to say, you have to really understand the culture and nature of Huntsville Center. Because Huntsville Center is noted as a center of expertise, they have a mandate that's different from a lot of the other Corps of Engineers offices. They have no geographical boundaries. Many of the districts, they are responsible for areas within like the Tennessee Valley or the Ohio Valley. But Huntsville Center can go anywhere around the world. Most places are designated by congressional allocations, but Huntsville Center is 100% reimbursable. So that they have to go out and earn their work. So you have to go out and get your customers, and they pay you back. Um, so it was based on the work that you brought in, is what I'm trying to make clear. And so with that culture, uh, many people, not everyone, but many people did whatever it took to try to get contracts into the center. So then the center would grow, the jobs would stay, the people would be promoted, and the work would come in. So you have that culture and that background um, that's driving this. However, you can do those things and still follow the regulation, still follow the rules, you can have your mission accomplished and still stay within the guidelines.
And then something came to your attention, didn't it? And you realized you had to speak up.
Correct. It was again. It was several things. It was just the way this team operated. They had contracts that seemingly went to the same people, even though you had small business contracts, and the regulation mandated that a certain percentage would go to small business contracts. Their contracts were still on the pathway of being awarded to the same people all the time. And so, and again, you had this contractor who functioned as the program manager, which is a big no-no. In fact, it's such an egregious thing that the deputy commander at the time, um, when it came to light because of my actions, he actually got banned from the building. So it was a very serious, yes, it was. They had very serious
Banned for a
violations.
while.
Banned for
What
a while.
banned for? Yes, thank you, Mike. That's correct. He was banned for a while because when the deputy director, direct deputy commander, I'm sorry, when he retired, they brought him back. So
Of
yes, you're
course.
absolutely right, Mike. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
And Tony, you tried repeatedly to address the fraud internally. And what
right.
happened?
Correct. We did. Now, what I would like to point out, because we did have excellent internal auditors, and had it not been for them initially, because again, you are going against the current. You are awarding contract. You're trying to make this program, who has worked for 20 years plus, outside of the bounds, now you're in with a cultural change and you're trying to force them to work within the guidelines, you're going to have that pushback and that retaliation. And so the internal auditors, because of the questions I began to raise, the contracts that had expired, yet the contractors were still working. And so this was just their behavior. They would just sign a contract and backdate it. The, the the program managers would call the contractors and say, keep working or start this contract long before we would even get a scope of work or anything. And according to the regulations, only the contracting officer can obligate the government with contract dollars. So and it's intentionally set that way so that you would have everyone staying in their lanes. The program managers responsible for the project, the engineering, the oversight, contracting officers uh, obligate the contract and make sure that everyone's in compliance in accordance with the contract and those regulations. You have the revenue, the money people. So everyone has a lane, and so Congress does that so that no one person is over everything and can make every decision, so that you can be fair, so that companies can compete and be fairly awarded contracts. And so, as I began to stop the fraudulent behavior and work with my auditors, it was they just decided this program needed auditing. They did draft an audit, the internal audit. We had several audits, but this internal one that sort of kicked it off. They did an unheard of thing in the audit. They actually stated that the contracting officer has been trying to um, get this program in compliance, and then they stated that for years they've been known to operate outside the lines with leadership's knowledge. So the
Wow.
commander, the directors, no one could deny that they knew this had been going on. But now they're forced to deal with it because now you're not rubber stamping.
Well,
And
I think
so,
Tony has sort of truncated things a little, because what's really going on is she's going that you have the regional council who is basically in charge of everything in their own way. And so Tony's writing memos and emails to regional council. This is unlawful. We have to fix it. And they're saying, no, don't do anything. And she got to the point where she had gone up the chain of command. She's gone to everywhere she can go to get results, and they just tell her, ignore it, just don't fix it, or there's nothing wrong. And so Tony gets all this documentation, puts it together, and slips it through the transom of the auditing department with a note
Whoa.
saying, there's problems here, could you please initiate an audit?
Whoa.
Okay,
Whoa.
so now the audit takes place. The auditors confirm everything, Tony says, 100%. And there's 3 auditors, and
Wow.
they're being called in to give the audit report to the commander of Huntsville Commander, and they give the draft first before the final, and they present the draft to the Huntsville Commander, and the Huntsville Commander says, you will put nothing in writing, and directs them to whitewash the report.
Oh no.
that was before they knew we had a copy, or
Well,
the
you didn't
individual
have the
had.
copy yet.
Right.
So
Oh.
so they're putting all this pressure on the auditors to whitewash and do everything. And in fact, there had also been an FBI background investigation going on. They wanted to hide everything. And the auditors eventually, uh, one auditor couldn't take it anymore and left the Corps
Oh my.
over it and gave Tony the draft.
Oh.
And
Wow.
and by that time, Tony had already been experiencing retaliation for initiating the audit, and she gave a copy of the audit report as part of her discrimination claims. So then the Huntsville knew she had a copy of it, and then they were forced to issue the report. And once that
Wow.
report got issued, the report called for further investigation. So then they had to start initiating further investigations, and then and under their programs, they had this AR 50 dash, was it AR 50 dash R
15-6, AR 15-6.
6 regulation that required uh, that they bring in an outside expert to do the investigation. And the outside expert comes in. Toni works with the outside expert, and the outside expert, who has to have the rank equal to or higher than the commander, issues a report saying that the person that Toni had identified as the primary wrongdoer had lied, had deleted material and destroyed evidence, and should be subject to further investigation and discipline.
Wow. But now there's retaliation going on during
Yeah,
all this.
you're right, because then what happens is they get those reports, they do, we learn the story in the litigation. So what happens is a new commander is coming in, they're changing over commanders, but they decide to let the deputy commander become technically the commander for a very short period of time. The deputy commander, so the process as they're coming in, the new commander is supposed to have the most relevant information in the top drawer of his desk when he gets there, open it up and see what's going on in his region. They take the new commander, they take the report out of the commander's desk, give it to the general counsel, who hides it. So the new commander comes in, has no idea this investigation has taken place, knows nothing.
And the new auditor,
Unbelievable.
as well as
Unbelievable.
the new auditor.
Well, I'm really curious. So here you are, Toni, you're down here, working your job. They're retaliating against you. They're hiding stuff. How in the world did you get hooked up with a world-renowned attorney like Michael Kohn, who has such a sterling reputation? How did you two get together?
Well,
How did you get the best?
it he is the best, and that's why I wanted to leave a lot of the legal uh, verbiage to him to allow him to do that. But um, how we met is honestly, Jay, yeah, I was just having so many problems
Mhm.
at work, and I was still by this time. I had a daughter, my husband and I. So I'm trying to be a wife, mother, full time career, and I knew Miss Bonatine Greenhouse, whom Mike also represented successfully. Um, I met her. She'd come in, and she was the first African American Black contracting officer that we had for the entire Corps of Engineers, and you're well aware of her story.
Yes.
And so she did, and when she became the new contracting officer, she went around to visit all of the offices. So I met her, and so I just called her up. I didn't know where else to go. I called her up, and I said I'm experiencing some of the same things that you are, that you've gone through, that you're going through. Her case was still ongoing at the time, and she gave me Michael's phone number. Uh, Very approachable woman, very smart,
Hmm.
and so I called Mike up, and we tell this story all the time, and I see him with his he has a little smirk because he knows what I'm going to say. I called him. He was actually on vacation overseas,
Oh.
and he says, "How did you get my number, and how did you get through?" He said, "Your call has been the only call I've been able to get while I've been over here." So we always say we were divinely connected.
Yes.
And actually, he says uh, abruptly, "I'm on vacation. Call me back later." And he hangs up. But
I didn't get many vacations back then. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
see, when you are desperate
Mhm.
and you have nowhere to turn, you have no pride. So I called right back. I called him back, and he was softer. And he said, "Listen," he understood. He said, I'll be back. I think it was Monday. I think he said, I'll be back in the country. Give me a call. And the rest is history, as they say. And he has been my most, aside from my husband, my family, my most staunch advocate. Um, I would almost tear up because what we have had to walk through together.
Mm.
Even personally, we've had, I think I've shared that with the National Whistleblowers Day, but I mean, you just imagine over 13, about 13 years of life together, and so we lost loved ones, and
Mm.
we had celebrations and milestones that we celebrated together. He's been to my home, I've been to his home. Our families have met, and so he's so much more to me than just an attorney, because your life, you entrust them.
Hmm.
When you have such a personal thing going on, it affected everything in my life. And so I had to entrust this person, and I always say he was like a big brother to me, because
Hmm.
there were things, and I shared when we finally successfully negotiated the settlement. And I won't jump ahead, but I shared this when we came to Capitol Hill. I think that was 2023 when we came for after the negotiation settlement. But I shared that I would see him. He didn't even know that I would be watching, but he would pull the counsel aside for the agency. And I mean, he would just run up one side and down the other and just
Yeah.
say, where were you? You were supposed to protect
Hmm.
her. And so without me knowing, that showed the type, without him knowing that I was watching, that showed me the type of person that he was, that he really stood for justice, and
Hmm.
doing the right thing, his character and his integrity. And again, where others would have given up on my case, he stuck with it, and he believed in me. He believed in our case from the beginning. And even now, he still fights, because we're still trying to get full, um, everything that we negotiated. We're still trying to get them to comply with those things. So, no one will ever get me to say anything bad about Michael Kohn.
Yeah,
Oh,
I haven't heard anybody say anything bad about Michael Kohn except for
That's
his
right.
incredible expertise. But
Right.
Michael, explain this case to us, and
all right.
and people really want to know, why did it take so long? Why did justice in this matter drag on forever and ever? What happened?
Well, first, when the second time Tony called and I was engaged on vacation, she literally was scheduled for hearing the next day.
Oh,
Her case was going to trial the next day, and she had a lawyer who told her, "Sorry, I'm walking. I'm not showing up to the trial." And he had been giving, let's say, everything had gone horribly wrong in her case up to then, and he actually had taken something up to the Court of Appeals in the Sixth Circuit, I guess it is, and everything was just horribly litigated. Uh, and I said, Tony, this is what you do. I wrote up a pleading. I said, just get your lawyer to submit this pleading, which said, put the case on hold and send it off to the Office of Special Counsel to do an investigation. And the judge agreed and did that. So then when I worked with the Office of Special Counsel to do the investigation, I was like, laid it out what was going on, and they said, and they decide they'll do nothing. Well, the office that delayed thing for a year, whatever it was, right then and there, and I was very upset. Office of Special Counsel back then for doing nothing.
no,
I mean, there's been some good Office of Special Counsel, but that period of time, they were
terrible.
toothless and didn't do anything,
Yeah.
or felt powerless to do anything. And so then we had to litigate the case, and we were assigned a judge, and honestly, we were assigned a very hostile judge,
Oh,
very hostile. And so it became a huge battle. We had to run to had to get the judge reversed twice. I mean, so that gives you an understanding of what's going on. Uh, the level of hostility in the litigation, and honestly, and I have a long career representing whistleblowers.
Mhm.
This was my I've only gone to the MSPB 4 times, and each one of those times at the initial level with the judges have been pretty horrendous. Most of them, all of them. I mean, I had uh, so I it was a hostile environment to begin with because
Mhm.
judges are also happen to hear all of the cases of of employees who should be getting fired. They hear all those cases, and they hear other cases, uh, you know, and they hear the whistleblower cases. That's it. So they get all the bad actor cases and have to, decide those, and they treat the whistleblowers as just they're just one of those bad actors. They don't see them as a different category of employee, and they're just literally hostile. I mean, that's how it went. They deny you the discovery you want. Uh, they just make it very difficult. So
Yeah, Michael, a lot of whistleblowers have that complaint. And is that the reason why the judges seem to be so hostile? Is they just put him in the disgruntled employee bucket? But I mean, her evidence was so great and so there. How could they ignore that?
well, this judge, well, at that point in time, uh, Tony had been subjected to the most horrendous
Yeah.
psychological abuse you can imagine for an employee would be subjected to, because you had a command structure who had been given training in psychological warfare.
Oh,
And so you really had they had reduced the most valuable employee in the entire contracting office to tears, to a point where she could physically not walk into the building
oh,
without breaking out in hives and crying. I mean,
oh,
it was so sad. Uh, and I think one of the highlights of one of the trials we did was the deputy commander willingness to come in and testify. So what you had is you had one really upstanding deputy commander who those auditors reported to. That's why they were allowed to do the audit, because he didn't shut them down. And that deputy commander came in and testified that in all his years, the most valuable employee he had ever worked with was Toni Savage. And on his last day of work, the only person he sought out to personally thank for all the hard work she did was Toni
wow.
Savage. And that was right before all the really bad stuff started coming down. So that really identified who Toni Savage was, what her level of expertise was, what a joy it was to work with her in that environment when she wasn't faced with having to sign off on fraudulent contracts, which was outside of her moral structure to do. So Toni was in a position where all the commanders and everyone who's coming in is saying, just ignore it. Your life will be great. And Toni was just incapable of ignoring the contract fraud, which
Right.
which was her job. So, like a lot of whistleblowers, she was doing her job better than anyone, and that's what ticked them off. All said and done.
Amazing. And so was it just Tony's personality? Whistleblowers are people of conscience, people of integrity that kept you going, Mike, in terms of pursuing this case? Because how many years did it take?
I don't know, Tony, how many years?
Well, we had 13 together, and
Oh,
remember also we there was a case before you that was settled, and then as a result, I was moved to the small business chief, and so you had those years on top of the 13 that we were together. So
Right. And so that was
wow.
you know, you, picking up a case after the first lawyer is
Mhm.
gone can be a nightmare, and honestly, it
Nightmare.
it was a nightmare. Uh, So there was that first settlement that she had was the worst possible thing anyone could have ever done. But I managed to get around that and ultimately um, got a determination that the conduct that they had engaged in after the settlement violated the terms of that settlement. The judge wouldn't hear any of that. That had to go back to remand on those issues. Um, so the first main issue after when we're going to trial is, Toni tells me about this audit and these audit reports. Okay, I can get these audit reports. And the Army Corps of Engineers says, "What audit reports? What are you talking about?
Uh-oh.
Oh, we don't have audit reports.
Uh-oh.
We don't have audit reports." So I work with Toni and she remembered the name of what rank was he? He was like I forget.
I don't remember. I remember he's from Ogden, but he was definitely in Army.
Yeah, he was a high level Army officer who had come in to do the investigation. She had his name, so I sent a notice of deposition out for that guy and document requests, and he showed up for the deposition. He had managed to have some portion of a draft he had done and went through the deposition and explained what was going on. And then uh, Army still refused to produce the reports. And it wasn't until the first day of the trial, after I'd filed a motion for summary judgment, basically, or default judgment, because they were withholding all this evidence, that the regional counsel testified at the hearing once. Well, they decided they were going to produce it the first day of the hearing, and the deputy counsel testified, "Oh yeah, it was in our law library." So they had, and then I got the whole testimony out of how they had taken it out of the commander's desk, had secreted it away. I got the testimony that the new commander came in, didn't know anything, and this is how they managed to fire her. So a new commander shows up, and they say, "Oh, we got this problem employee. She hasn't shown up for work for however long. Like,
Yeah.
physically can't go into the work site because she'll have a nervous breakdown from the stress that they put her under." Uh,
Right.
and they don't tell her she's a whistleblower. Don't say anything about it. She's just essentially that they portray her as an employee who's no longer of value to Huntsville, and so he signs off on the termination, and he testifies at the hearing. Exactly, I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know about this report. Never saw it. Do any of it. Um, and they had intended that report would never be seen by anyone. And actually, there were two reports.
Yes,
After
yes.
the first report was done, the recommendation of the first report was to conduct a second report to determine who was responsible for letting this problem fester and take place and who should be held accountable. And the second report identified the commander and the regional council as being complicit in the wrongdoing and failing to fix it, and said Toni Savage was the star and should be awarded and congratulated for being the only person in the entire region willing to stand up and do the right thing. And after that report was issued, they secret that away. They removed Toni Savage from her position and allow the wrongdoer to continue doing the wrongdoing.
That's amazing. That's
Absolutely.
that's amazing. Toni, you must have felt so defeated at that point because here
Oh,
they squirreled away stuff. They're painting you as, a malcontent, the person really responsible for all these problems. What kept you going?
I have to say that was probably the darkest uh, time in my life ever. Um, One thing you talked about, Mike, I heard you say my moral structure, and I just want to say um, my parents, um, the daughter of my parents have been married 66 years, and they taught us to work hard, uh, study, be good people. And so I could not imagine, and then you'll be rewarded. for your work. And I've
Mhm.
seen that in their lives. Like I said today, my dad will turn 90 this week, and
Mm.
so I've seen them work uh, throughout their lives, work their way up. And so what has guided me, uh, we are people of faith. As you know, I'm a minister, uh, Baptist minister, Southern Baptist. So my faith plays a big part in my life, and of course, my husband, my amazing husband, supported me. Our daughter, my parents. To this day, I'm named. One of the reasons I like to say Tommy slash Tony is I'm named after my dad.
Yes.
He had five girls, no boys, so I was the last. So he just said, "I'll just name her a boy." So we were taught, moral values, and so that's what guided me, and just doing the right thing, doing what you know to do, and so I didn't know any other way to be. Um, but it was a very hard time in my life,
Mhm.
and I just could not imagine these people, some of the same ones who gave me a baby shower, some of the same ones we've done Christmas parties together. Um, but it was not until I got in a position of authority to where I could say no and not allow some things that it was, not received well. And not only not
Mhm.
received well, but then you're on the end of retaliation. And I do remember the day I was walking through the hall and the EEO officer, because I was known, even the auditors, the chief auditor, she would see me in the hall. And she said, I can always tell the contract when I'm reading. I can always tell your contracts before I even see the contracting officer's name because I you get a full picture and I know your work. And so the EEO officer stopped me in the hallway and they all knew this was coming. I didn't know. I was just still just trying to work, just try to do a good job, just still and you're berated every day. Every
Yeah.
day you're faced with all of these problems from this program. People over in Japan getting arrested, and you have people from overseas calling you, that contractors that you have no idea that are still working because the program manager is telling them to continue work, but contracts have long expired. And he stopped me and he said, um, "Do you have every documentation that you would think you would need if something were to happen?" I didn't know at the time, It- and I said, "Well, I'm a pretty good documenter. I think I would." And when I look back on that, that was his way of kind of warning me that this was coming down the pipe. And overnight, I was transferred. My
Mm.
program was transferred to someone
Mm.
literally overnight that had never happened before,
Mm.
and it just went downhill from there. But I just continued to document, continued to do the work that I knew to do according to regulation. I will call headquarters if I needed to. I had a great advocate in Mr. Tony Bell with him, and he made many calls, but they were just unrelenting because,
Yeah.
for one, they had not been used to, and you just have to say it. You have to just call a car like it is. They were not used to having a black female
Mhm.
in a position of authority that could say no. And
There wasn't any black females in supervisory roles, correct? So
not until we were promoted. There was a group at the time, and so that culture did not, they were not used to it,
no.
accustomed to it. So we got a lot of pushback, a lot of surveys that were
Mm.
done in the center, with hostility, saying, you unless you're a black woman, you can't get anything in the center. Uh,
Mm.
but again, I believe they were established in '67, if I'm not mistaken. So all the way up to there until like the 2000s, the year 2000 or so, you don't have anyone uh,
Yeah.
of that looked like me
Right.
that could make decisions. Uh, and that you had to abide by those decisions. Because if I said no, that was, regardless. And so even if you went to the commander, if he cannot override a contracting officer, now they may persecute and retaliate, but they can't override what your authority is, because the contracting officer alone is designated that warrant, and you can be personally liable also. If you're found to do kickbacks and all, you can be personally liable for whatever
Right.
the judgment is against you. So you
And that
have
was
to
a
be diligent.
and that was a problem with the entire Army Corps of Engineers. It wasn't just
Mhm.
Toni Savage. And so I came on to understand the larger picture as a
Yes.
result of four contracting officers in the Army Corps of Engineers who I represented over time, one of whom was Bunny Green.
Yes.
So like, so she was the highest level contracting officer of the entire Army Corps of Engineers. She had the protocol of a brigadier general, and she went in and told all of her contracting officers, and like Tony's saying, she had an unlimited warrant. That's signed by Bunny Greenhouse. Only Bunny
Hmm.
Greenhouse had the authority to give contracting officers their warrants. So uh, the people she had put in place were all dedicated, honest, and going to work hard. And what also happened is, because the Army Corps of Engineers was a very male-dominated
Mhm.
institution for hundreds of years, the only place women could actually start getting promotions and whatnot happened to be in the contracting area, because this Diarrhea law came in. They had to hire new contractors, and they had to bring in and bring in really qualified people. Before, it was basically the commander would get his buddies to do whatever
Mhm.
job, and they, it was very,
Mhm.
it was pretty bad. And so Bunny Greenhouse's actual husband at the time had written the laws, and then Bunny Greenhouse was selected to implement them. And everything was going okay until Bunny Greenhouse like blew the whistle on the Iraq war contracts, 17 contracts, and she was getting in trouble. And at that point, they decided they were going to hammer all of the Army Corps of Engineers contractors, anyone who wouldn't just go along with what the commanders wanted. They wanted it back just the way it was.
Yeah.
So, so Tony shows up at the point in time where there was an awakening, where there was a law was passed, and she was supposed to go in and now make sure these contracts were done correctly. And the commanders didn't want it done correctly; they just wanted it the way it was. And so when she finally got to a position of authority,
Mhm.
and could see what was going on, because she really didn't have the visibility beforehand. Well, as soon as she gets the visibility and sees it's all unlawful, she's like, okay, what am I supposed to do? And eventually, once the auditors and whatnot, and other so it was a mess. Any contracting officer who raised problems that they were supposed to raise, that the law told them they were required to raise, were being fired. So it was a nightmare.
Oh.
And the contracting officers didn't understand it, because they thought they were just doing their job. And why am I being fired for doing my job? Didn't make sense. Uh, and so there was a real disconnect between the a dedicated core of contracting officers wanting to make the program better and say and implement the laws and regulations, versus a contractors who wanted large contracts, because a lot by that time these contracts had been growing larger, whatnot. They wanted to make sure small business was out. They wanted to make sure all that they kept all of their contracts. And the only way they could do that is if the commanders were in charge and picking who the contractors were going to be, as opposed to Toni Savage, who would look at
Mhm.
the actual fundamentals and follow the rules and regulations and say this contractor should be getting the award instead of your buddy. And
Mhm.
where things were breaking down in a big way.
Big
And I
way.
had such trust with the contractors. They would call me. I would get calls from contractors, to alert me to certain things. It was so bad until the 15-6 officer that Mike talked about. I kept binders on my desk because it was daily. The auditors, the 15-6 auditors, came and worked from my binders because people were taking things out of the files and covering things up. And so I had a complete copy. And one thing I'd like to add on top of what Mike said, another
Mm-hmm.
thing that people are not aware of, but it's very known if you go back and look at it. Most of the time when commanders are coming to, especially like Huntsville Center, they usually have maybe like a 2-year command or so. They're on their way to retirement, and so then
Oh,
they want to land big cushy jobs with these contractors. Even if you look at the commander in my case, look at where he landed after he left Huntsville Center. They get big jobs with these contractors,
mm-hmm.
and so they don't want to do anything to upset them
Mm-hmm.
beforehand. They want to try to move things in those directions so that they, after their career, they can have another career.
Yep. And
Basically,
Tony, I'm sorry, Michael, go ahead.
the contracting situation had gotten to the point where if you were, and this is from Bundy Greenhouse, who saw it all, and basically, whatever rank you retired with, when you walked into the room and contracts were being negotiated, you maintained your rank. And if you outranked the person from the army who was responsible for that contract, they say yes, sir, to you essentially and do what you wanted. You
Oh,
maintained your rank even though you were left the military.
whoa.
So that is why you start to see all the contracting companies hire as many more stars you had, the more they
Better. Isn't that something?
The interview will continue after this brief message. Become part of the growing grassroots movement that supports whistleblowers around the world who risk their careers, financial security, friendships, and even their freedom to speak out against wrongdoing. Make a one-time gift or become a monthly donor today. Every donation makes a difference. Visit whistleblowersblog.org to give.
And Tony, the behavior you faced really raised issues about workplace retaliation. And you eventually filed a whistleblower individual right of action appeal with the MSPB. And Mike, as Tony's attorney, can you tell us about that process, the board's decision, and why you two set precedent on this case?
well, we set precedent because Tony was subjected to an extreme
Mm.
hostile environment. So her first case, remember now she's been removed from her position. Uh, these reports had happened. They're covering up the reports. That's when she had this other lawyer who basically has a settlement that provides her no protection and nothing really. And
Yeah.
one of the terms was they're going to transfer her, but it's not really clear where they're going to transfer her to. We later I later proved that it was essentially a demotion, not the type of transfer they're supposed to do. But they put her under all the people who had been retaliated against her as her direct supervisors. And the psychological warfare was ongoing because now these
Oh,
investigations were still unfolding, or they wanted to cover them up. They didn't want anything further to happen. And there was only one, by this point, the auditors all left. Okay, they couldn't stand it. And they testified at the hearing. You know, the pressure they were put under and whatnot. And they all left. So the last person standing who knew what had happened and knew where the bodies were buried was Toni Savage. And all they
yes.
had to do was get rid of her, and they were clear sailing. And so they put her into a position. They took away all of her support staff,
Mm.
overloaded her with work. So you had the most competent, best employee who couldn't even begin to keep up with the workload they were doing. They
Hmm.
refused to give her interim, evaluations, and then they would start downgrading the performance. And Tony
Yeah.
been working there, I don't know how long, and they're like literally not taking a day of sick leave ever. So she had banked all this sick leave. So she's now all burst through all of her sick leave. She's at this point seeing psychologists who is writing to the Army Corps of Engineers, there's you got to give this woman a break and some time off to heal. And at that point, that's when they basically go to the commander and say, "Oh, this person, we have to get rid of this person." And out the door she goes. So she had, the difficulties in her case were, one, they settled; the other, her removal from her real position. Her next position she was in, everyone surrounding her was hostile and going to do everything they could to destroy her. And so it made for a difficult, a horrible time for Toni. They thought they could get away and do anything they wanted. And they acted that way and treated her in such a way that ultimately allowed me to use the torture, literally, I would say the psychological torture they put her through. It allowed me to at least use that to create the first case law for federal employees that said hostile work environments, you may file a claim based on hostile work environment. So that is the first case law for protecting government employees from hostile work environments.
Wow, congratulations, both of you. That is a major, major milestone for federal workers. Congratulations. You have set a standard there that many people will really be able to utilize. That's incredible.
Like I said, the first administrative judge was very hostile and basically said, no, if you don't show up for work, I don't care what the reason is, you're AWOL and I will rule against you. And that was it. It doesn't matter what I said or did. That's what that judge was going to do. And that's exactly what the judge did. Ignores all the evidence, just says, you're AWOL, goodbye.
And speaking of that judge, that just reminds me, when we were there, the very first hearing, Mike came to Huntsville, and he pulled us to the side and said, I have no doubt that you were a great employee and that you suffered some great injustices, but why don't you just go work for a contractor? And in my mind, I'm still thinking, well, why do I have to? I'm the one, I'm the one that's upholding the standard and the rules and regulations. So why? And he was hostile towards Mike as my attorney, and again, Mike has successfully had him overturned several times. And even when we went to Atlanta, he was for the appeal. And I'm not sure if you remember that, Mike, but that's when he told us that he says, well, now this is being known as the Savage standard. So that's what it was being known as nationwide, the Savage standard. And so he was just hostile towards everything, although everything pointed to truth for us. Everything backed up. There was not one allegation that was made, literally, the 15-6 substantiated. I think there were like 16 or maybe more different allegation points that were documented, and it upheld each and every one of them.
Oh, yes. The report spelled out,
Spelled
confirmed,
it out.
and laid out all the facts and identified who was responsible for what. And at the end said Toni Savage should be congratulated as the only person in the region who did the right thing.
Who did the right thing.
And called for investigations. And I don't even know if it may have been called, and discipline against the wrongdoers. And instead of doing any of that, they removed Toni Savage, and then they give the main wrongdoer the highest level contracting award from the Army Corps of Engineers by the national commander from the Army Corps of Engineers. It was like the biggest slap in the face you could possibly imagine, signaling to everyone that
Yeah.
violate the law, do what you want, because these contracting officers, we're going to slap them down, and we're still in charge.
Amazing. And so, Michael, how many years did it take from beginning to end that you had in this fight? How many years?
A lot. One of the reasons was because the Merit Systems Protection Board has to issue these decisions, and they're appointed by the president. Okay. And so under Donald Trump, there were 4 years where they didn't have a board. And I guess we may end up that way again. So one of the shortcomings in the protections for federal whistleblowers is that if there isn't a quorum in the board, they can't issue a decision, which means your case just languishes there for 4 years. Or if the administration goes on for 8 years, potentially. Um, so that accounts for 4 years of it, just
Mm,
the delay of filing the appeal before the board, and we had to go before the board twice. And then it just took forever.
yeah.
Yeah, and I
That's
remember one
and you
thing
hung in there. You hung in there.
hung in there, but yeah, the second, so the first hearing, the judge avoids all uh, of the real meat of the case, rules against her, and the board now rules say no. Basically, lays it all out and says now reevaluate all this evidence we're just looking at that's in the record
Oh,
and issue a new decision. Okay, and now I mean we had one really big, but the board didn't want to like totally slap down the judge and gave the judge the opportunity to do the right thing and just correct his decision, issue a new decision. Well, the judge was like, "I'm not going to do that." All the judge had to do was issue a new order, just following exactly what the board did, and the case over. The judge said, "No, we're going to do a whole new hearing." See,
oh,
the problem the that the other side faced was we put on our expert witness who testified that the sole cause of Toni Savage's psychological injuries was work related. They went through her past history, everything you can imagine, and it was and they accepted that person as an expert. So we had unrefuted expert testimony that the sole cause of her psychological injury was work related. Period. And the judge says, well, no, I'm going to hold a new hearing, reopen the record, so now the Army Corps can make the record that the sole reason wasn't because of them. And then
oh,
he denies the discovery. They don't even allow me to do a deposition of their expert. So they call their expert in, who had literally seen Toni for 1 hour, 10, 15 years,
oh,
and and says, no, that's not but cross-examination, you find out that expert doesn't believe that you can get PTSD or psychological injuries from a work-related thing. No, so that was an impossibility. It was just a horrible situation. And so
yeah.
now we had to make the record all over again, call our expert,
Oh,
lay it all out, and of course the board at the end, that judge ruled against us again, basically rubber stamping
oh,
decision. We have to go before to the board a second time. Then there's this 4-year delay.
oh,
Board reams out the judge and says, "Didn't you read our first order?
oh,
Now go and fix it." So now we're before the judge for the third time, and by that time, I think he was didn't want to do it a third time, and the Army Corps of Engineers knew that the case was lost and there was no way to salvage it. So they decided that they would finally sit down and settle the case. And let's say it is a unique settlement, and
yes.
one that government settlements are supposed to be open to the public and free to everyone
Right.
to see what the government did. This settlement isn't,
Why?
because the Army Corps of Engineers didn't want anyone to know what's in it.
Oh, for Pete's sakes, it's sealed.
It's not sealed. I guess technically, file a Freedom of Information Act request. Maybe you can get it.
Oh, oh, are you planning on doing that?
Not us. No, we know it.
Okay. Well,
We
maybe
know
I'll
it.
do it. Yeah. So is it over? Is it over?
It's though that case is over because it was a settlement. However, now we get to the enforcement of this settlement, and it turns out that we there were violations. We had to go back to the same judge who ruled against us the two times to on the enforcement of the settlement. The judge actually found some violations of the settlement. I mean, but there's like in some ways you could look at it as a petty thing, but it really
Mhm.
one of the terms of the settlement required that the commander issue Tony a letter of praise. Well, I don't know what it was really called, but
Yeah.
a written letter signed by the commander, uh, and they issued one that was signed by I don't even remember. It wasn't signed or signed by some electric pen, not by the commander. And it was like, come on, the
Mhm.
judge ruled for us on that one. Said issue one actually signed by the commander.
Unbelievable.
And we actually rewrote that letter because the one that they gave was so generic, it didn't highlight any. At the beginning of our talk here,
Right.
we shared some of the programs that I worked on.
Yes.
These are high level programs that
Right.
I worked on that went around the world. None of that was captured. I don't. None of it was captured. So we really rewrote the letter. Yeah, it wasn't signed. It was just basically
Yeah,
the
and well,
draft that was.
the draft, what the commander had to sign was attached to the settlement agreement. It's not like that he had an option what to do or not. So what after the settlement was approved by the judge, he had to sign it and issue it, which is they wouldn't do. They just wanted to slap and one more slap. It's just petty things. Anything petty they could do, they did.
They did. They
And
did.
uh,
Unbelievable.
delayed implementation of the terms. The lawyer who was on the case doing the settlement, I have respect for, and I don't think that lawyer was involved in any of this, but it became the region. Huntsville had to implement the settlement, other people had to implement it, and that's when things started falling apart. So I have to go back to the other lawyer a million times. She's at
Oh,
for whatever they're doing every time, but it's still going on. How many years now?
Well, I've officially been retired since April of 2023 officially.
So we're
oh.
so that case we filed an enforcement action. That case is still pending. We'll see when that comes up. But it was a unique settlement situation. Army Corps knew, and also what made the case very difficult as far as for the Army to settle is because it did take so long, and
Mm,
under and so they had a lot of liability that they were responsible for. Um, and they thought they had unlimited legal resources, and uh,
mm.
they had compromised legal ethics, and I'll tell you that much from the people who had worked on that case, I was very upset with. And that's why Tony said she heard me reading those people down because some of their conduct was not acceptable to me.
Well, I hope you were able to file every billable hour that you spent on this case because you deserve it. And Tony, I have to ask you really quick as we're closing here. You're aware of the Boeing whistleblower who committed suicide. I talked to the mother of the AI whistleblower who committed suicide or was killed. What kept you going through this terrible retaliation, this long stretch of time, being beat up at work? I mean, what kept you going?
You know, again, I just have to say that I didn't know any other way to be. I had a daughter who was relying on me. She was
Mm,
young. My husband, and I just believed if you do the right thing, that right will be on your side. And I don't know that it was even like a conscious, it's just something that's instilled in you. I don't know that there's just one conscious decision that you can say, oh, you're just trying to survive,
Yes.
actually. And again, I cannot say enough for me, my faith. I don't just, I really have to live it. I'm not a perfect saint by any means. I'm just saying what the role that faith plays in my life. Uh, that if I just did not have that belief that it would be righted in some way, I had to believe that because everything was riding on that. Um, Again, my husband, an incredible support. And honestly, one thing that really did keep me going as well, um, I wanted to be an example for my daughter because
Yes.
I wanted her to see. And I remember sitting her down saying, and again, she's a young girl, and I said, they did what they did to mommy, but you can hold your head up to know that mommy didn't do anything wrong. I will never go to jail for having done anything. We'll have to work it out. We will have to, fight this fight over here of justice to try to get it corrected. But you can always know that I never did anything wrong. And I had to live that out so that she could grow up to be a productive person in the world, so that
Yes.
her life wouldn't be that impacted to where she's a broken person who can't contribute to life. And I have to say, that just by the grace of God and my husband and my family structure, we're just a close family. Again, my parents, you can't be married 66 years and not have uh, some life
Yeah.
skills and life integrity. And so that just kept me going and just allowing. And today, she's in school now for a respiratory therapist program. She's a very well adjusted person. I just can't. She's my heartbeat, and I do
Hmm.
all that I do to make sure that she has everything that she deserves because I still do have a lot of guilt still about
Yeah.
some parts of my life not being there fully
Yeah.
during that time for her. I did as best I could, but it's something that you never fully overcome. But
Hmm.
you find some vindication in knowing now that the truth has come out. Again, you go from being this illegally terminated person
Mm.
to there's some type of responsibility. And even when we were getting ready to settle, we had to make the decision: do we want to continue to fight through the justice system, which has taken so much of my life and my
Mm.
years, or find some level of compromise to where we can go ahead and move forward and go on with our lives, knowing that we do now have this law that not only help me, but will
Hmm.
help people who have that are coming behind me, so that they won't have to hopefully be subjected to what I had been subjected to for all those years.
And I think what was interesting is we had to put in a psychological report for our expert, and so when the report goes on and says, okay, I've evaluated her family life. There is no stress. Her daughter is getting straight A's in schools. Has a wonderful marriage. They're financially stable. Every and then they go on family history. No one in her family has ever had any psychological issues. Work history, perfect, 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 up until an exact point in time. It's not like you get like you have perfect review, perfect
Hmm.
review for 20 years, whatever it is, and all of a sudden you're being removed and you get downgraded. And so the report was clear that the sole reason, and Tony isn't really explaining the true depths of the level of despair they put her.
Oh,
I mean, as low as a human being with a sense of consciousness and dignity can be drawn down and still survive. I mean,
right.
one more level down, and I don't know if Tony would be sitting in that chair. It was
Yeah.
that level of despair. And I think
Yeah.
what's also important for people to understand, I mean, whistleblowers like Tony are hard to come by.
Mhm.
They're unusual people.
Yes.
And what makes it sad is when those unusual people do what they do and they get destroyed, because if it took 10 years or 15 years for litigation and you're unemployed, you can't pay a lawyer. How are you going to get someone to do it? And if the other side has unlimited legal resources and
Exactly.
very skilled lawyers, how do you even go through the maze? How do you figure out to get those secret reports?
Right.
how do you do the litigation to make them turn them over and all the rest of it? It is difficult and hard, and if you have hostile judge on top of it, what
Oh,
are your chances of surviving at the end? And the system understands that the odds are minimal, and the
yeah.
amount of time is so great that
Mm,
whoever the wrongdoer is, they will no longer be in that position. The effect of the decision won't get bring them down. They will have retired or gone on somewhere else in their
right. Right.
and so there's whatever the whistleblower protections currently are, they are exceedingly substandard. I think the American people have a misunderstanding that whistleblowers actually get real protection when they don't. And uh, the battles you hear, the ones who come out on top or have won are rare. The others
Mhm.
have gone through the suffering, have
Yeah.
made an impact, but get no personal relief.
Right.
And I couldn't be more honored than being to have the opportunity to represent someone like Tony.
Yes.
It's sort of like this dual, side of you saying, "Okay, Michael, you're gonna lose a decade of your life."
Oh,
Thousands and thousands of hours you're gonna have to pour into this case in order to win it. Okay, she deserves it,
wow.
and she does.
Truly. Yeah. Truly two warriors here today. It's just so impressive. And Tony, I know, Michael, you set precedent. You are going to make life easier for a lot of whistleblowers with the precedent you set. I mean, that's just amazing. And Tony, you have not laid your burden down because you are involved with the National Whistleblower Center. You're on the National Whistleblower Advisory Board. And you've recently been named a member of the National Whistleblower Center Board of Directors. And that's amazing that not only have you survived, but you're giving assistance and help to other whistleblowers. That's a hero. That's a warrior.
And she would have been on that board a long time earlier. We have a basic rule, if you're involved in litigation, we don't put members on until the litigation is over. So, and honestly, I will acknowledge that I am exceedingly happy that Tony joined me as one of the board members.
Yes. Yes.
Such an honor to have been appointed, voted on and appointed because it's important work that they're doing. And as he said, so many people don't make it as far as we have made, as you
No.
well know. And so all
Mm,
we can continue to do is continue to build on the work, just to keep try to strive for fairness and justice. I mean, we can see even in the news today,
mm.
many of the inspector generals being fired, the gatekeepers. So we just have to continue to stay on the job, and just honored to work with just an amazing group to go from someone who um, needed that
Mhm.
support,
Mm.
because when I first attended my very first whistleblower luncheon, again, we were in the throes of this. And so I was so ashamed of what I was going through because, you're just
Yeah.
working, and now all of a sudden, I had a high visibility job, and my husband traveled a lot, and he would go to places, and they were like, "What's going on with your wife? I heard she's
Yeah.
doing wrong things." And so you're accused of a lot of things And so to go there and be surrounded with others who were going through some of the same things that you were going through, who could really identify, that started help me to build coming out of my shell about it. And so, even with Mike saying now that, I'm truncating it, I leave a lot of that to him because,
Mm-hmm.
I still have to protect my mental health.
Yes.
You still have to do that because it was a debilitating time.
Mm.
But we were able to work through it, and again, so that we can now be on the other side of it. Because I do believe one of the main drivers is that they have that unlimited resources. They can
Mm.
just keep, if they file another action, they're on staff. The government is paying for it. The employee has to pay for that private attorney. And so many don't make it this far.
Mm-mm.
And so
No.
now we're now responsible. Those of us who have, yourself included, look at what you devoted your life to, Jane. So we are now responsible to try to make it better for others.
And,
Yes.
and
And
the environment is going to be a lot more difficult because if you go back, it was the auditors, it was the person, the commander who came in to do the 15-6 report. You know,
mm,
if you're in an agency, those type of people now would be like the inspector general would come in and do your investigation for you. But inspector generals have been fired, so whistleblowers lose the ability to even get their allegations documented. So it's much more difficult environment. You mean
mm,
I'm not sure if there's a quorum on the board right now, and there may not be another quorum. Means maybe another 4-year delay before you, even if you won before the administrative judge, be 4 years before they could implement that uh, decision. So
mm,
everything is at this point at a tipping point for federal whistleblowers. We'll see how it ends up. Things sometimes get worse, and that produces a better result. But it's going to be very hard time for whistleblowers. You know, I just having a watching the news every day and
ugh,
waste, fraud, and abuse. And we have a
no.
new organization, Doge, who's supposed to ferret out waste, fraud, and abuse. However, if you read the whistleblower law, the federal whistleblower statute, Whistleblower Protection Act, it is created to allow employees to raise waste, fraud, and abuse and expose
Abuse.
it. And if they had just implemented those laws the way it was supposed to be, and an employee felt free to identify the waste, fraud, and abuse that they saw, all of it would be rooted out. But instead, you have managers
Ugh,
or political appointees in place who don't want to know, or they're covering up the waste, fraud, and abuse. So if you're really interested in getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, it's very simple. Just empower the whistleblowers, empower the people of your workforce, and they will let you know where everything that's going on and how to improve it. And you'll have a much better system. The only people who are standing in the way is the administration and the administration staff, who doesn't want anyone pointing fingers at the programs they want run the way they want them run, whether it's lawful or unlawful, whether it's wasteful or unwasteful. They don't care. They don't want anyone standing in their way. So I'm waiting for someone, some newscaster along the way to say, "Oh, waste, fraud, and abuse. Why don't you just empower whistleblowers? Because they will get it done." And everything else, you're running around looking at everyone's social security, this or that. You're not going to find waste, fraud, and abuse. You're just going to find raw data. The waste, fraud,
yeah.
and abuse is the person who's sitting there day in and day out and said, this program is ineffective because of X, Y, and Z, because I'm responsible for implementing it, and they won't let me implement it correctly to make it more efficient, or they won't let me hire this person because they want the contract to go to that person. It's all there.
Mm-hmm.
All there. That's what Bunny Greenhouse was about, trying to create a honest core of contracting officers who just called it what it was and just took the fraud away from it and made people not want to engage in it and make the system run correctly. That's what whistleblowers are about. They just want to do their job. They want to do it the best they
Mm-hmm.
can. So
Wise words. Wise words. Michael, I wish, this will reach a lot of ears, but I wish nationwide they'd hear those wise words and we'd have whistleblowers like Toni. I'm going to give you an opportunity now for any last words. And also, if you have any contact information you'd like to give, if somebody would like to get a hold of you, please feel free to do that. But we'll start out with Toni. Do you have your last words?
Well, again, just I can't say enough what Michael Kohn, and Colapinto, and
Yep.
uh, the National Whistleblower Center has meant to me and my family. I can't even remember. I think it may be like 1% of cases are successful before the MSPB. Uh, but I think that again, if we just continue to build on what we have, uh, Stephen Cohn, as you know, is doing a great work in this area, and Dave Calapinto.
Mm-hmm.
They have just all been just a dream team for me personally, and we just like to continue doing the job that we set out to do, to finish it, to help other people that are still going through it. And especially now, as Mike just said, with
Mm-hmm.
the new administration, the work and the need is just even more great. And so I'm committed to doing what I can to do to help and to just to make it easier for people who are truly doing the right thing. I know there's not a favorable uh, opinion right now in the news if you look at some of the comments that have been made about federal workers, but I worked with a lot of great people who were trying to be good stewards over their job duties and what they were instructed to do and hired to do. And so I'm just committed to continuing that work.
Excellent. Thank you, Toni. And I'm glad your parents are alive to see what a hero and a warrior you are. And
Thank
thank
you.
you for having the case that set precedents. That's just so big. I don't think you even know how big that is. Mike, your turn. Esteemed attorney, been in this business of advocating and protecting whistleblowers for decades. Give us your last words here.
I guess all said and done, it's people like Toni Savage who, when they come, honestly, it's like I'd rather be like doing a lot of other things, but all of a sudden someone gets to you and you have an opportunity to hear something that you know is the truth, and you understand that a grave injustice has been done. And there,
Yes.
you look around and it's like, okay, no one else going to fix this. Well, all right, I'm going to do it. And that means you have to dedicate, a lot of your life to help one person. And that's how
Mhm.
whistleblowing is. It's one person at a time. Uh, and knowing that the odds are stacked against you, for me, made it worthwhile. And I guess all boils back to my father. It's
Mhm.
not a surprise, I guess, who was a World War II hero, uh, who never backed down, who actually got 4 silver stars in World War II.
Wow.
Sorry, 3 silver stars, 4 bronze stars, Purple Heart, Congressional Citation, a real war.
Wow.
And he told me his stories or whatnot, and he never backed down. And unfortunately, he didn't make it to the 90s. He died when I was 17, so I had this like s- warrior spirit that I needed to find out why the world took my father from me so young. It was to give me the strength and fortitude to fight forward, and that's what I've done.
Yes, it is. And don't forget your mother. What a warrior she was. But
Oh
thank
yeah,
you. Yeah, don't never forget.
she was the enabler. She enabled me to do it. My father
She
gave
was
me the spirit. My mother taught me right from wrong, as did my
Yes. Thank you for protecting whistleblowers, Michael, for setting precedents for future whistleblowers. They owe you a debt that is immeasurable. Thank you, Toni, for being a hero, a warrior. Really appreciate the time that you two gave to this podcast. And if you want to get a hold of either Toni or Michael, just contact Kohn Colapinto. They
Are
are
the whistleblowers
National Whistleblower Center, National Whistleblower Center, who will help. And thank you, two heroes, for what you've done. Amazing.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you for listening. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. You can find more whistleblower stories at whistleblowersblog.org. Music by Rachel Kilgore, guest booking by Victoria Thompson, and editing by Anissa Cheek. Whistleblower of the Week is a production of Whistleblower Network News. The views expressed by podcast guests are their own and not those of Whistleblower Network News.